wave the magic wand and then.
Yeah, you need power, there's.
Yeah. Put it in right there.
Can we turn off the lights?
No, no,
He's just talking, there's not video. Oh.
move this.
Pull that back, just.
Let's fill my fruit punch all over the keyboard. So again, I'm John Grassby. I'm an attorney, been a corporate attorney for 40 years. And I don't think I've ever run into a small business in all those years of practicing that didn't need money. They need a lot of other things too, but they always need capital of some kind or another. And up until very recently, that's been a difficult road to hoe, thanks primarily to the Securities and Exchange Commission, which has always made it difficult for small.
Can I interrupt a second? We need to get your audio for the thing. So you can do this, or you can do the mic. You don't need a mic.
Can you hear me better now? Okay.
Check the sound meter.
Is it working?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
It's bouncing out.
Okay. Again, needless to say, the world of intellectual property is a vast arena, and I'm here to talk about a relatively narrowly focused part of that, which is raising investment capital to fund a business startup or the expansion of an existing business, or more research and development so you can take your idea to the next level, or expand your business, or ready your business to acquire or merge with another company. So give me I kind of was listening with one ear, but how many of you have an idea that is, quote, ready to go? Okay. Great, great. And now having an idea ready to go can mean a lot of things. In how many cases do you still need more R&D or more product development to get it to the point where it's actually commercially viable? Typically, it used to be that you could develop something out of your garage or, man cave or wherever and go out and make something happen with it. But anymore, the quickest, fastest, easiest approach to commercializing a new intellectual property idea is licensing it to a bigger organization which has the manufacturing and the distribution and the marketing and the R&D horsepower to actually make something happen. To give you an example, I have a couple of clients in Oak Creek, which is a little town south of Steamboat Springs, who have developed a very clever bullnosing tool. Bullnosing is, when you lay tile, the tile itself comes with a hard edge, and if you're laying tile on a surface, you kind of want the edge to be bullnosed or curved. And that's always been a kind of a tedious, very, very labor-intensive process. And they've developed a technique, a tool that you can simply attach to a tile saw, and you do 2 or 3 runs, and you got not only a bullnose, but a polished bullnose edge. Now, they started out wanting to basically take it to the, to the commercial level, and then develop a manufacturing empire of their own, until they realized that was, at least a $200 million $200,000 proposition, and they, didn't even come close to having that kind of money. So I talked them into licensing it, and we've now got 3 big tile tool manufacturing companies that are interested in taking that idea, licensing it, and going from there. At which point, my clients hopefully wind up with what they call mailbox money. In other words, every month or every quarter, the royalty checks are cut, and they get their share. Granted, it's a much smaller percentage of the sales, but as always, it's much better to have a tiny percentage of a giant pie than owning a non-existent pie. So that's, again, let me ask you, how many of you are ready to actually license your idea with somebody? No? Yeah. But that doesn't really, depends on, how much money you actually have in the bank, but licensing something with a big company that has that kind of manufacturing, distribution, marketing, blah, 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 potential to take your idea and make something happen with it. That usually doesn't take a lot of money. It takes a lot of work with, takes a lot of selling to the big companies. And it also requires an attorney that knows something about licensing law, which can be very, very complicated. Another example, I've got 2 clients in Silverthorne, both of them PhD pharmacologists, who have developed a way of combining CBD, which I'm sure you've heard of, with statin drugs. A statin drug is what prescribed for high blood lipids and cholesterol. Unfortunately, the statin drugs have a lot of negative side effects. In fact, 20% of the people who take those drugs wind up with those negative side effects. Even though 40% of the American adult population, that it's recommended by the medical industry, that 40% of adult Americans over the age of 40 should be taking these statin drugs, which seems crazy, but that's the statistic. But only about 1/3 of those actually do because of the negative side effects. Well, by combining CBD with the statin drug, the drug is made much more effective with 0 negative side effects and at about half the cost that people pay at this point. Yeah, go ahead, please. They can use either one. The chemical constituents of CBD, CBD is CBD. So, you can synthesize almost anything in the lab. And sometimes it's easier and cheaper to synthesize something than to grow it because you have more consistency. As you probably know, marijuana has something like 113 different constituents. One of them is cannabinoid. The constituents are called cannabinoids. And CBD is, I forget the whole name, it's about this long. But that's just one of 113 constituents of marijuana. Well, distinguishing, extracting just pure CBD can be very, very expensive because you usually wind up with certain percentages of all of the Um, as you might imagine, taking that to where it's actually ready for big pharma to take the product to market, they're still a long ways away from there. As a matter of fact, they estimate that even where they are right now might take them $200 million, might take big pharma another $200 million of all of the human trials, which they can't possibly do, but they've got their proof of concept far enough along to where big pharma is actually interested in licensing their product. But you can imagine the legal provisions in a licensing agreement like that. It's very lengthy, it's very technical, very complex, and you really need an attorney for whom that is his or her specialty. And that's an incredibly narrow niche of the practice of law. My guess is there aren't 100 attorneys in the whole country who are capable of putting that kind of negotiating and drafting that kind of agreement, and I am not one of them. I know enough to be dangerous, but and I can help my clients do that. They figure they're about 6 years. If they were to license it with a big pharma company, it would take them about 6 years before they would start to see any kind of assisted royalty checks. Yes. It's just murder getting a major drug through. However, at one point, at the peak, when one of these statin drugs, I can't even think of the name, but Merck was making $150 million a year off just one of them. And there were half a dozen of these statin drugs. Each big pharma had its own version of it. So now with the patent having run out and the drug now being a generic drug, the annual revenue from that, from Merck, is down to a mere $6 billion, which is still very significant. But, it's a fraction of what it once was, which is why they're very interested in some way to jazz up their old product, make it newer and better and improved, and give them another 16 years of patent. It makes the side effects go away altogether. The research coming out about CBD is primarily coming from Spain and from Israel. And every week, the results that are coming out, that are being published, are just astonishing. And it isn't just, it's lowering blood pressure, it's lowering pain, it's lowering anxiety, it's treating shingles, it's treating cancer. In fact, there are two pharmaceutical companies in Chandler, Arizona, that, according to my guys, are a year and a half away from introducing a CBD-based cancer drug that just has absolutely astonishing properties. So CBD is amazing, what would you call it, compound, amazing thing. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. No, they already have a kind of a preliminary patent approval, sort of the first stage of it. Yeah. And which means that, when they go to talk to a big pharma, they actually have a reasonably intelligent thing that's pitched to make. So tell me a little bid about any one of your products, about what is your market? Who do you see selling this to? Do you see selling it yourself or licensing it to someone else? Both. What would you need money for at this point? I mean, if you had a couple $100,000 right now, would that make it better, faster, easier for you to get to market?
Not necessarily. You know, most
Sure.
I don't know, I have a number of things, certainly some of the more simple household-based things I might be able to manage on my own, small manufacturing. There are other things that there's no way that I possibly would be able to do these machining, tooling, welding, metals, coils, et cetera. That ultimately speaking, I have to go with something, so my only choice would be either to figure out a way to try to fund this, or to go down a licensing route for sure, would be a large manufacturing process.
This may sound like a crazy question, but how many of you have ever watched Shark Tank? As I'm sure you remember, the first question the sharks ask is, how much money do you need, and how big of a piece of action are you prepared to give up for that?
A lot of times, how much money have you made? We
Yeah.
really like to see people that are already, so if they're already selling
But they also, but if, someone comes in and says, well, I need $200 million and I'm prepared to give up 2.5% of my company, you can just see these guys roll their eyes and think, are these guys even on the same planet? And I have found over the years, working with startups and entrepreneurial companies and even small, medium-sized businesses and inventors, that kind of approach is not that unusual. I mean, I have heard those kinds of, when I first asked the question of a client, how much do you need and how much you're prepared to give up for it, they want this much money, they're prepared to give up this much of the company, not understanding, again, that even a small percentage of a huge pie is a lot more than no pie at all. When I'm working with clients, and again, this whole world of intellectual property is huge, and my focus, my expertise, or at least my niche, my legal niche, is pretty narrow, and that's how do you go about raising money. But I don't get the sense that any of you are, if you're not looking to raise at least $250,000, it's difficult to justify the time and the brain damage and expense and so forth of a private offering, of going out there and raising, say, $250,000, $500,000 to fund your idea. What would... I'm sorry, say that again.
at least $250,000 you want to raise to justify the cost.
At least that, yes. And that may sound like a kind of an arbitrary number, plucked out of the sky, but it really isn't. Putting together an SEC compliant investor package is not a slam dunk, easy proposition. You don't just pull boilerplate agreements off the shelf, staple them together, and then have something ready to hand out to prospective investors. It takes quite a bit of thought. The first one is having a comprehensive business plan. Okay, got an idea. What are you going to do with it? Where are you going? How are you going to get there? Who are you going to hire? Who are you going to bring in to help you get there? What's your degree of certainty? What's your degree of passion? How different is this from somebody else's idea? In other words, Me Too ideas don't fly very well in the private investor world. Private investors want to be investing in something that nobody else is doing. And that's why I'm trying to get a sense of where I can, what aspect of this I can talk to that will be the most, give the most benefit to you. Sir, what if you had $250,000 to work with today? Could you, beg your pardon?
I'd spit on your shoes because I don't think
Okay. And do you have, can you make a, kind of a spreadsheet projection for how you would spend that? Okay, good. That's good. I appreciate that because where I'm going with this is up until about 3.5 years ago, these private offerings that are now permitted by the Securities and Exchange Commission, Rule 506C offerings, didn't exist. But Congress mandated that the SEC make it easier for small to medium-sized companies to access capital, which 506C does. Most of 506C offerings to date have been 250 million, excuse me, 2.5 million and below. But the fact of the matter is you can use a 506. I mean, General Motors could use one to raise $1 billion. There's no limitation on the amount of money that you can raise for that using that kind of an offering, or the number.
raise that amount of money.
Yes.
What kind of SEC reporting?
That's the beauty of it. It's exempt. You can. I'm not going to say you can get away with murder, but you can it certainly makes life a hell of a lot easier than a full-blown public offering. Full-blown public offering, man, you're signing up for a lot of reporting, a lot of record keeping, a lot of paper that has to be filed every year. With a private offering, once you tell the SEC that once the offering is subscribed and you advise the SEC and each state in which your investors live, the securities agency of each state in which your investors live, once you've done that, you don't have to tell anybody anything anymore. Now, you're well advised, of course, to keep your investors apprised of what's happening, the good news as well as the bad. But I am astonished that the brokerage houses haven't figured this out yet. I'm sure they will. But
How many are you looking for them investors?
you mean a private offering? No limit on the number of investors, no limit on the amount of money that can be raised. It's pretty amazing. It's really kind of make it up as you go along, which is why I think most securities lawyers have not exactly jumped on it yet. Most brokerage houses haven't jumped on it because you do have to kind of make it up as you go along. You have to write the book as you go along. You have to kind of take some chances. But so long as you comply with the spirit of the law, which is to advise investors, to provide investors with the same kind of information that would otherwise be available with a public offering, you're pretty much bulletproof. And of course, a huge part of that is having a really solid, viable business plan and projections that line up with that plan and justify that plan. Usually I find that footnotes to the projections are very helpful. Instead of just a line item saying, we project $6 million in sales.
You're going to do a full red herring no matter what.
Except that nobody is going to look at it. Nobody has to approve it. You're doing it to sort of comply with the spirit of the law. So if the deal goes south, which half of all small businesses do, and an investor feels that he was misled and goes to the SEC and says, well, these guys sold me this security, and they said this, this, and this, and this, and this proved be a lie, proved to be misrepresentation, then the SEC can come in and make their own determination. And if they determine that in fact A, B, and C were intentionally fraudulent or intentionally untrue, then they can assess up to treble damages, which of course is catastrophic to the issue. But so long as you play it straight, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, you are remarkably bulletproof. And I have some ideas about approaching bigger companies about using this instead of IPs. Because you can advertise private offerings in the newspaper with seminars, what do you call them, infomercials, which
So all the restrictions about offerings that are normally part of a public offering don't apply. You have to have a qualified investor.
you do have to have an accredited investor. But think about it, what does that mean? Accredited investor is simply an investor who has had an income, personal income, $200,000 a year for the last 2 years and expects to have at least $200,000 in income in the year in which he makes the investment. Or has a net worth of $1 million or more exclusive of his house, or with his wife, they have $300,000 per year for the previous 2 years. Again, exclusive of buying a house. You know, those rules were, I mean, they came up with those numbers, oh my God, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, they're hopelessly dated, but that's still the rule. And you really, when you're raising money, you kind of want somebody who has some financial juice behind it. You don't particularly want somebody who's rolling the dice with their grocery money, who's going to be calling you every other day. Oh my God, how's the deal going? How's the deal going? Also, you usually want somebody who brings more to the table than, quote, just the money. Money's important, but it's nice to have somebody who has some marketing expertise, manufacturing expertise, or distribution expertise, financial expertise, whatever, in addition to the money that they're putting in. And, so I tell people, don't bewail the fact that investors have to be accredited. Use that to your advantage. To kind of the guys who really can't afford it are sort of automatically disqualified. You don't have to lay that off on the government, but it's actually, you can really use that to your advantage.
So, if I have a problem with, say, insurance company money, I just have problems. I would solicit them, the investors, design in.
I'm sorry, say that again if you have.
If I had a product that was going to save insurance companies money, like in terms of losses, increased losses,
Okay.
does that sound like something that they would be interested in, potentially investing in?
So long as the insurance companies, with the accredited investor standards that I was just giving you was for individuals, but there are also accreditation standards for companies. And most insurance companies way beyond what the minimum accreditation standards are. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you get. No, it can be any kind of a corporate entity you want, but typically it's going to have to be an LLC or an S type corporation. But you get, yes, with an L.
probably some conditions, but I can't go over them.
Right.
It's like more of a private thing, if it's someone, whether
You're absolutely right. It's a much more illiquid investment than a stock in a publicly held company.
So is there a approved method for making a private placement public? You know, say you issue
like if you grew it on.
20 million shares, and you grew real big, you take that,
Yeah, it's a different animal. But, you know, you've got a company that was originally funded with private investors, and you're rocking and rolling. 5 years from then, you want to take it public? Absolutely, no restrictions whatsoever. Except, remember that if you're selling interests in your company, you're diluting your ownership. Now, people say, well, you know, that really bothers me. I don't want to give up control. Well, the way you avoid giving up control, again, whether it's membership interests in an LLC or stock interests in a corporation, is you make it preferred stock or preferred membership interest. In other words, they get a preferred return on their investment, unless there's money to be distributed, but they don't get to vote, which means you retain 100% of the voting control, but you're not giving up.
member placement, it's a management LLC. Management operated.
Management operated, yeah. No, you, as the issuer, you want to maintain management control of the entity, absolutely. Just as a matter of normal sort of business practices. Yes, that's what I've kind of evolved over the years. I started out as an antitrust lawyer with IBM. It was a wonderful coup right out of law school. The only problem is I started with IBM on a Monday, and by Wednesday afternoon, I realized that IBM and I were not cut out for one another. And I wound up going back to Colorado and kind of interesting career in Denver and then at Steamboat. I don't know if you remember. In 1976, Colorado was going to host the Olympics, and Steamboat was scheduled to be one of the major venues for that. And so there was an absolute real estate feeding frenzy there. And I was representing a lot of Denver investors who were just buying up everything they could find in northwest Colorado, anticipating that the prices would quadruple overnight. And so I wound up spending quite a bit of time in northwest Colorado, and it didn't take very long before I realized that I liked the people up there a lot more than the Barracudas that I was representing in the Denver area. And another attorney and I went up there, and we were both coming off a divorce. We had a combined net worth of, but worth of this fruit punch. And yet we made expenses the first month. Never looked back. I'm sure we would have made a lot more money staying in Denver, but neither one of us exchanged our lifestyles since then. But I bring that up because now Colorado is again looking at trying to host the Winter Olympics. The Steamboat is again being advanced as one of the venues, particularly the alpine events. So we'll see what happens there. It has nothing to do with what I came here to talk to you about.
How long does it take?
Good question. If it depends on how much help I have to be with the business plan and the projections. And I always tell people, that's your job. That's your end of it. Only you know enough about your business to write that business plan, to do those projections intelligently. That's not my thing. And then inevitably, I wind up doing an incredible amount of that editing of the business plan and editing of the projections, so that so they kind of jive with the business plan and make some sense. But in a perfect world, if the issuer, the client, is prepared to do the business plan and the projections, we can have an investor package ready to go in 2 or 3 weeks maximum. This is a, whoa. This is a sample, not a sample, this is an actual investor package for an organic dairy in northwest Colorado that has been very successful with cheeses, yogurts, and so forth. In fact, their cheeses are featured on the menus of maybe 2 dozen restaurants, high-end restaurants, excuse me, in Denver. And, you know, it's fairly lengthy, and it's the kind of thing where, you know, if you have insomnia real bad, you might want to try and read this. But that gives you an idea of, you know, that's a fairly simple deal. In fact, that deal is only raising $250,000. So it's kind of right on the edge of whether it made sense to go take that, put forth that much time and money and effort. But so far we've seen quite a bit of interest. Yes. It was kind of a nothing is ever simple. Basically, he was giving up a fifth of the company. The collateral, he was looking to raise $1.5 million for a fifth of the company. An offering of up to 1,500 common voting membership units. In this case, the issuer decided that, you know, he didn't want to have people who didn't have a vote. He wanted them to actually be full members, if you will. At a per unit price of $1,000 for a total offering of up to $1,500,000. Minimum purchase is 25 units, and which means $25,000. Upon full subscription, subscribers here too will hold a 37.5% ownership interest in the entity. And the entity is going to own the dairy, or the land that the dairy is on, not necessarily the buildings and all of the equipment. But actually the numbers work out pretty well. It's actually a fairly conservative, this isn't a get-rich scheme, but it is a remarkably safe one for somebody who wants to invest in agricultural property, and particularly a company that makes organic products that are, you know, good for the so far, it's about halfway. This just went active like 2 weeks ago. So it's yeah.
He already had his own potential pool of investors.
I'm sorry?
He already had his own potential pool of investors.
No. Little background. I started out doing these private offerings, and pretty soon realized that it was one thing to put together a, you know, Pulitzer Prize winning investor package, which are, you know, fairly expensive.
It's
But I hand this to the client, to the issuing company, and unless he has a lot of very rich friends and family, or a whole list of potential investors, what's it worth? Not much. So about a year ago, I started trying to figure out how to make it easier for my clients to actually get the word out. The SEC says, you can advertise in the Wall Street Journal, you can put on seminars, you can advertise in the local paper, so forth. But that's expensive. No, none. It says below. Except for the fact that you can't pay sales commissions other than to licensed real estate broker dealers. So you can't get there. Okay, so about a year ago, I started working with a financial services company in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, of all places, that had also kind of picked up on this 506C idea and thought, gee, this is a remarkable opportunity for our firm to start to cash in on this, because more and more people are more and more nervous about investing in the stock market. And anyway, long story short, they had already spent almost $250,000 on software necessary to create a portal. Think of it as eBay for private offerings. And it's taken forever, for freaking ever, to get that, to get all of the software working. My private website and their site and the portal site. But where we are now, hopefully by Monday, believe it or not, we're going to have liftoff and deals like this that I have done the work on. They have looked at 15 of these and said, it's like to know what the heck you're doing. If you have actually done the legal work on this, then we will list your deals on our portal. In other words, your deals will get, some fairly substantial exposure to accredited investors. And there's a whole kind of sub-software system in there. What they first see is sort of a one-page fact sheet. Hey, this is the basic deal. If you're interested, press here. If you press here, then you go through a qualification process to make sure that you are, in fact, accredited. And if you pass that, then you get access to all of this online. And then you go from there. But at least in theory, clients of mine who otherwise would have been, kind of knocking on doors and trying to figure out how to sell their deal, have almost immediate access to about 5,000 accredited investors. I no guarantees. I have no idea how many of those 5,000 investors will opt to participate in this, but it's certainly better than the alternative. So what I bring to the table is a fairly rare expertise in putting these things together. There just aren't that many lawyers who know about this and are willing to jump on it, let alone also provide the client with a way to actually sell the security once it's applied. I think I've done 22. So, I've put together 22 of these. I think, at last count, 16 of them have become fully subscribed. Another 3 have been not fully subscribed enough to where the company opted to go forward. For example, there's a bakery in Steamboat, a phenomenal bakery. Their bread is just out of this world, and they wanted to expand. And I rolled my eyes, but I rolled the dice with them, and we did a $250,000 offering so that they could buy more ovens and improve their retail space and do a little bit of marketing and so forth. Hire some people, and they put an ad in the local paper about this big, cost almost nothing, the local Steamboat newspaper, and they ran it Wednesday and Friday. By Tuesday, they had raised 240 of the 250,000. And they said, we can go with that. And so they did. So, I mean, that's one of the ones where it wasn't fully subscribed. It was subscribed enough where they opted to go forward. And the wonderful story, they've gone on to do very well. Their investors are thrilled. The community, it's become a real gathering place for outrageous pastries and coffee and tea. Yes. $1 million back. Right. Right. Anything's possible, right? Yeah, it's definitely a different ballgame. But VC venture capitalists, in my experience, are fairly predatory human beings. And frankly, if I'm an issuer, I would prefer to not have too many venture capitalists in my little group. I mean, they can just devour you. And the objective is, if in fact it is that successful, and they're looking at that kind of a return, at the same time, their brains are working overtime on, gee, how are we going to take this thing over? And usually they have far more sophistication than the issuer and more money, which means they have an inherent advantage at doing precisely that. So, and frankly, I think that this was part of Congress's idea, was to make opportunities in these kind of more down-home business opportunities available to down-home folks rather than the venture capitalists. There's nothing to prevent venture capitalists from scooping this up, but you're right. The odds of them doing that, they won't. Exactly. Yeah. Question? Yeah, I feel that I'm adequate. Oh, I'm adequate. My skills are adequate for licensing something like that. How complicated can hooking a device onto a tile saw and putting it onto a tray and moving it back and forth to put a bullnose. That's pretty basic. That's pretty elementary. Adding CBD to a statin drug, that's a whole other thing. In fact, I've already sort of drafted a pro forma for that licensing agreement so that when they go out to talk to prospective licensees. And the licensee says, well, what do you have in mind? They can say, well, here's the starting point. So we start with our position on it, rather than letting the big tile manufacturer, tool manufacturer, kind of define the parameters to begin with. I was not involved in that. I helped them find a guy who that was kind of his thing, and if it works, he's going to make a lot more money than I am. But hey, that means the client is successful, and it's one more sort of notch I can put in my resume.
This isn't for ceramic, it's for tile with the colors throughout the.
Our constant, yeah, very good. Yeah, because it's just the surface, and the bullnosing screws it all up. Yeah, absolutely. And the tile business has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Tiles used to be, what, 4 by 4? And now, I mean, they're like 3 feet by 4 feet.
I thought I had somebody else earlier, what's the possibility of doing this?
I have, my flat fee is $15,000, third up front, a third when I finish the subscription agreement, which is kind of the core document here, which takes a remarkable amount of time to get just right, to both have it reflect the deal accurately, every aspect of the deal, but also comply with, the SEC compliance guidelines. And then a third once I can actually physically hand this deal to the investor, or pass it off as online document. Kind of moving towards putting more and more of this online, because as you can see, the paper is 20 investors, and all 20 of them have one of these. Paper. Well, I measure it by the weight. Heavier, the more money.
So as part of that 15,000, you got a total of whatever is necessary to allow investors, is that part of the deal?
The listing on the portal is extra, but it's a relatively modest amount of money. My idea is to use the availability or access portal as an additional selling point for my firm, the work that I do. It's right now it's $500 per month for a listing on the portal, and we hope that 2 months, 3 months maximum, we'll either get the thing sold or get it sold enough where they want to go forward. Not all offerings, including public offerings, are fully subscribed. But usually, if you need 5 million, people will go, or if you need 4 million, people will go for 5 million, knowing that, if they don't get to that goal of 5 million, they're still okay. So we do some of that with private offerings as well. Yeah. Well, so far I've had 3 where the interest just wasn't there. And one of them was a company based in Steamboat that had developed a vertical growing technology, which was good for greenhouses, but also for marijuana, and basically anything that you could grow. So if you had a 500 square foot greenhouse, you weren't limited to 500 square feet. You could maybe grow stuff in 5 or 6 or 7 tiers, so you had 6 or 7 times production out of your greenhouse. I just absolutely would not did not generate the interest that I thought it would. And, the client was very disappointed, but it was what it was. And one of them I can't really talk about. Let me kind of chew on the third one. Very complicated tax situation. I think it was more at the end of the day, the prospective investor wants to sit down with the issue. Look them eyeball to eyeball and say, okay, who the heck are you really? What are you really going to do? How are you going to get there? And these guys, these two guys, were very difficult people. And in my opinion, they shot themselves in the foot again and again and again. And I listened in on some of their presentations, and I said, guys, you can't say this, you can't say that. You can't come across as hard ass. Being a hard ass does not necessarily mean you're going to be successful in business. And they didn't want to hear that. It was kind of a unpleasant situation all the way around for me and for the client, and for the prospective investor. That was before I had this portal idea. So.
And I said, very, very hard to make that sense.
Some of the materials that I emailed to Roger and requested that he send out talk about that. There's a lot more to making a business work than just the money. That's a hugely, it's a very wide statement to make, but it's so important. You got to have the right attitude. You got to bring integrity to it. You've got to be reasonably personable. You've got to bring the passion to it. You've got to be able to convince the potential investor that you can make the company successful enough to justify the risk. We talked about a 10 to 1 for the venture capitalists. Most prospective investors in private offerings, they may not be looking for 10 to 1, but they're looking to at least double or triple that money. And unless they see that potential and the passion to make it happen, and a way to make it happen, they usually say, as they say on the Shark Tank, I'm out. And another is they want to see some simpatico-ness between, if there's more than one principal in the company, they want to make sure that Tom and Dick and Harry actually like each other and are willing to work together. And if that's not the case, then it's probably not a big deal to invest in. Picking an investor or picking a partner in business is hugely important. Just because they've made a lot of money doing something else, there's no guarantee, there's no automatic qualification, if you will, for them to be your partner. There's an aside, there's a very successful real estate developer in Denver that I went to law school with, who has basically developed a reputation over the last 20 years. You don't do business. You're always going to get into a fight. Doesn't matter how good the deal looks. Doesn't matter. Yeah. When I first started practicing law, a very savvy, street-savvy lawyer told me, he said, if you're looking to do a deal with somebody or to work with somebody, said, let me follow this rule. He said, it's not very scientific, but if that person likes kids and animals like him, that's the kind of guy you want to do business with all day long. If they dislike kids and animals and kids dislike them, just walk away, because sooner or later you'll, run into some unpleasantness with that person. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I swear to God, that was some of the best advice I ever got.
You know, the biggest thing I'm seeing is a lot of these guys, I'm sure this is probably too, the reason there are 50 people here is because they haven't been able to share the brain. I mean, let's face it, we have this idea. It's a wonderful idea. If we can't communicate that brain to someone else in a rational manner, that that's right. And there's a lot of guys that just don't care. So it's right on all you want, but they're not going to give you the idea that, it's just,
It is crazy. It's difficult. I mean, being an inventor is a tough road to hoe for a lot of reasons. One, of course, is simply coming up with the ideas, but being able to communicate what that thing, that idea, that process, that gizmo can do, and have the other person get it, requires a certain skill that not everybody possesses. And if you don't possess that skill and you go out and you try and sell it, and you get told to go to hell enough times, pretty soon your interest and your enthusiasm just drops off the cliff. Yeah.
the thing about it is that doing that requires a lot of preparation. We agree with that. We agree to skill takes too much knowledge. Okay? That's what it is. 10,000 hours. Okay? You got more than 10,000 hours of reading something, and you're pretty good at what you do. Well, be good at anything that's 10,000 hours. And to be excellent is even more.
Well, I've got about 20,000 hours of motorcycle racing time, so I can make certain claims that being a pretty good motorcycle rider too. Racing.
Well, he's still alive. I mean, that's the proof.
Yeah, see, that's the proof. Okay, so that fire brigade could hire replacement. That's the approach, right? So the investment comes in, you usually do an investment, you say, okay, so let's go and an LLC, so we do an operating agreement. Is that extra then?
No, that's the operating agreement has to meet certain criteria, in my opinion. It has to fit with the subscription agreement. It has to fit with the business plan, with the projections. It has to.
That's kind of one of the more complicated.
Yeah.
There was someone wanted to go to SRC board stock.
That's fine too.
So is there separate agreements for the stock, or say, like, I mean, what I'm thinking of, like, have investors in class of the stock.
Right.
So, these agreements is to, I guess, it's, the investor rate, you have the option to buy 100 shares of the stock. So is that kind of
Yeah, it's a kind of somewhat different documentation, but what the operating agreement in an LLC is, it's sort of all of those things wrapped into one. So if you have a corporation and you're setting up different kinds of stock and different buy-sell provisions, you have to document all of that somehow, some way, and then all of that documentation becomes part of your investor package. And that's part of what I do for.
Yeah, the way I understand it, like, the manager won't see what is actually class of stock.
But you can do that with an LLC too. In the operating agreement, you can create 10 different kinds of membership interests. It's something, 97% of all new business entities in Colorado are LLCs, which I think tells you,
Because it's simpler and easier.
yeah. Um,
So
they're-
most of these private placement investors, are they actively involved in this, or are they more arbitraries?
maybe 50-50. I mean, if you're doing an offering, by and large, you kind of want that 50-50. You want at least half of it to bring more to the table than just the money.
Contracts, expertise.
Yeah. Sometimes just mentoring. Mentoring is huge. Somebody's been in business for 40 years. It's nice for the issuer, for my client, to be able to go to that person and say, "Oh my God, what do I do now?" Which usually happens about once a week when you're first starting a small company.
So, just bringing it up, I'm guessing that you have the option of saying, you got one investor, if they're not agreeing, do you have a game plan, or they're not gonna help you out in some way with this dollars that you're talking about?
In the operating agreement, I provide the issuer with some pretty draconian authority to get rid of an investor who, for whatever reason, is simply more trouble than they're worth. So far, we've had to use that once. Because you usually, before somebody comes in and writes a check and signs the operating agreement and signs the subscription agreement, you usually try and have breakfast and lunch with them a few times and look them in the eye and make sure that, you feel comfortable with the person. Of course, you never really know the other guy. I like to think I know my wife, but sometimes she'll say something and I think, "Oh my God, who is this person?"
When you say draconian,
When I say what?
draconian methods to get rid of an investor, does that mean you just take it back?
Yep.
They don't have to, even if they don't want to, though. You have to make it, it's all processes.
It's all in here. If the 61% of the existing membership wants to vote somebody out, they can do it. Force them out. There's a price to be paid, of course. The person gets, at the very least, gets money back that they invested, plus some modest interest, or they get their percentage of the company, depending on the valuation of the company, as presented to the company's banking. In other words, when a company goes to a bank, the bank usually insists on financial statements. And at the end of the day, your financial statement makes a claim as to what that company is worth, what its equity, stockholders' equity is, what its net worth is. And if somebody owns 12.5% of that company, then that is the 12.5% of that number given to the bank is where you start. So, yeah, we can force people out. We have to, but but they don't get screwed. They get their money back with some modest.
Well, the intention could be, if, as an investor, I would probably approach it from a perspective, okay, how do I protect myself? Let's take it to there's 5 people. Let's say 3 of these people know each other, they're bringing 2 other people. You use these 2 other people's money for a couple of years, right before your thing's gonna blow wide open and be worth 10 times the amount, you force the original 2 investors out. They get a little bit back, including interest. You then go on with the company and it goes up in a good manner. So that would be something that somebody investing would want to protect themselves and, okay, if you force me out, maybe they have a valuation in the next few years or something. You see what I'm saying? People, that could be abused as well.
You're absolutely right. So far, I haven't had that happen, but you're absolutely right. people are willing to do to other people, even after all these years practicing law, it never ceases to amaze me. So that's when you sign up in the beginning, you usually want to make sure you've met not only the issuer, but also the other investors. And that is one thing I insist on, is that before you actually kick the deal off, that all of the investors, every single one of them, sit down with the issuer and over a meal and actually talk to one another. And I usually sit in on that, and if I have to kind of prompt some meaningful discussion, I don't hesitate to do that. I want people talking about stuff that maybe they don't usually talk about. Who are you really? What are you really looking for in this? There's are any of you familiar with TED Talks? Who's that guy he wrote a book called Why, The Importance of Why? And in fact, that's in some of the materials that I handed out. But he said everybody knows what and how they do it, but very few people ask why they do what they do. And I've used that for a long time. Why do you really want to get involved in this company? And it's amazing how much effort it takes to get people to start thinking along those lines and verbalize, well, why are you getting involved in this? What's your objective here? And at some point I would urge you to go to that talk. I think it's 18 minutes. I know it's where is it? Just for what it's worth, this is kind of an aside, but over the years I've done a lot of mediation. I have kind of an unusual background. I was born in Calcutta, India, and I grew up in Mexico City. I still speak Hindi and Bengali, and especially Spanish, and have done a lot of international work. And along the way, I've done quite a bit of mediation, because if you get a conflict between a Mexican company and a Canadian company, sometimes taking it to court just doesn't work, because both the legal systems of the two countries are so different, and people's expectations are so different that they're sort of like crossing in the night. But anyway, one thing I've discovered in mediation is that people are very seldom angry at what they tell you they are angry about, or at the person against whom they direct their anger. It's amazing how many lawsuits are fought against the wrong people for the wrong reasons. No wonder the damn system, doesn't work better than it appears to. And again and again and again, I find I have to separate the parties, sit each one of them down in private, and say, okay, what the hell are you really angry about? Because what you say in your pleadings and your complaints and your counterclaims, your briefs and your derogatories and all this, mass of legal documentation, I can't connect the dots. It doesn't make any sense. Tell me what the hell you're really pissed off about. And inevitably, it's some ridiculous slight that happened 4 years before, but the CEO uses his position to sue the other company, when what he's burr in his butt is really that the CEO of the other company um, wasn't polite enough to his wife at a reception at the country club. You know? I mean, honest to God, I know that sounds ridiculous and trite, but I've experienced that again and again and again. And, you know, so all of the,
May I read related concerns that I had?
please.
As you might guess, looking at me, I'm busy with the second. I'm your northern friend. So,
Can I give you my, my list before you leave?
I have selective memory, so I'm not sure it's all that good. But, look, you can have the pen. I'll give you the pen. Okay? Won't you listen to me? I went to a group of medical people but I'm there at a grown-up function just because somebody thought it would be nice to have Saturday. And it was, for the most part, a big joke. And I went along with it, you know. And the lady would come up and sit on my knee, tell me what they want, jump in their showers, invariably in their showers. And I was more a postwoman than I would even see with my wife that day one time. Anyway,
Or even Santa could be a dirty old man.
but not willing. I can tell you that. I don't like that kind of behavior. Okay? I dealt with that. And I told one woman who insisted on doing herself,
But he would never admit to the real reason why
Of
he didn't,
course.
why he didn't hire you.
That's right.
Yeah.
People do things for strange reasons. You know what I would like?
Yes, sir.
I'd like if you get your card, I'll give you mine. I'd also like to see some of the documents that you used to have. Yeah. Yeah, you can feel up in the cloud. It's all perfect in the cloud. So, well, I don't know. That's right.
I have a question. They said, well, it's been suggested I have advisory so, I guess another there's a distinction is corporate boards and advisory boards. Corporate boards usually say advisory board as a sort of a higher level, they're not owners, they're just consultants, sort of, but they, not necessarily actually stock options. So, some of this advisory board may be looking at maybe a company that does
The options are virtually unlimited. There's nothing chiseled in granite, one way or the other. You can have as many advisors as board members or more or fewer. Yeah, an LLC, again, that's the beauty of an LLC. You can just do almost anything you can possibly imagine. And having those advisors is a great idea. And you're right, you don't necessarily compensate them with money. You can compensate them. Well, that too. Compensate them for, with product or with loaves of bread.
If you're working in an LLC, like their compensation is level of you said you got
Kinds of, Class C preferred stock for your advisors, Class B preferred membership interest for your board. Again, the possibilities are truly endless, and everything is perfectly good. What you're trying to do is bring as much expertise as you can, yeah, without necessarily giving up, the voting control. I'm actually very impressed with the Shark Tank. I think people can learn a lot from watching that because the questions that the sharks ask are excellent. And they're relevant to almost any startup you can imagine.
So if you can answer the Shark Tank questions easily enough, then you shouldn't have any problem attracting more capital.
In theory, absolutely not. Because most people are asking for too much money for too small of a piece of the action, too small a piece of the pie.
Yeah, but I like to explore that piece of the action with like, okay, take a hypothetical system. I've got a company I've started, I've got some assets, some customers. So let's say it's all worth, and okay, I'm looking for private placement. So I want to raise a company. So by doing private placement, my company's theoretically worth $200,000 in assets, cash, capital in $1 million, right?
It's not necessarily worth $2 million at that point. What has happened is if the total capitalization is $1 million, then that posits a company valuation of $2 million. But that isn't really what it is. It's what you're having to sell is the future performance.
Right, I mean, that's going to factor in, but I'm trying to think of how do you address the fact that I got this investor who's coming in, $1 million in capital. So on the surface, I could say, okay, we do 50% of the company cash. But for the $2 million company, they're $1 million.
Right.
I'm just thinking of some criteria for this percentage.
No, I think you can put a price on it. I think you can say anything you want.
You, typically, if you invest $1 million, you're going to experience an immediate dilution of your of the value of your stock. If you buy 1 million shares of stock for $1 million, and there's another 1 million shares that are issued to the owners, say, for that dilution effect immediately, and that's where you have to sell, like the gentleman in the back has said, the idea, the concept that, hey, yes, there is some dilution now, but 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now,
Let's
it'll.
say I was an early angel in that first evaluation. Now, next week, investors come in, valuations now I have a my 500,000 shares is worth well, I have a clause that saying that.
And what you were buying,
Of course, I should say, yeah, I've got the capital, so my
Is there anything good to eat back there? I am just absolutely
yeah,
starving.
there's a sandwich. There's a sandwich too.
Is there a sandwich still left back there? Could I prevail upon you to deliver it?
Like, this valuation thing is like, it seems like it's a lot of misunderstanding. And I know it's an exercise, especially.
Well, I'm amazed, on the Shark Tank, every single deal. They're not talking about present valuation. They're talking about future valuation. Every single. Thank you. No. But if they see some legitimacy to the explanation of how this little company is going to be there,
Where you're getting your numbers.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, I mean, I'm not looking back at some of that.
So there's a lot of salesmanship in these offerings. Work.
I had an RFQ that I got. I had an RFQ for my invention. So I went to one of the people who would probably be the prime users of my invention. And I made a proposal to them. I would invent something that would reduce my invention. After 6 years. Okay. Maybe turned around 2 years later, after I completed the initial proposal, issued me an RFQ for 17,000 units.
Just a second. RFP is a request for proposal. What's an RFP? RFP. Oh, request for quotation. Okay.
An RFQ often among large companies is turned into a billable device, purchase order, because they're usually on the same form. But in my opinion, RFQ is not as much as a match that takes perfect. But what they're really looking for is if I were to deliver 10 units tomorrow, with one price of 17,000, so buy one, that's just the way it is.
Let me ask you a question. Would you be okay with forwarding on my written materials? And I think what I'd want to do is polish them up a little bit to the overall membership. Yeah, I was looking at those earlier today and thought, geez, you know, we should be. I'd like to get the word out to as many people as possible that this way of raising. Thank you for coming. Do I have your emails? Or does Roger have your emails? Okay, terrific. You won't mind? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
So, one of the things I was going to do is raise money on maybe and to do a crowdfunding campaign for donation. You want to give them a free thing, so I came up with a model of how my device works. So the way it produces gives you a certain amount of money for that they get a copy of the model, in scale, so that an investor will give me $25 gets a 1/48 scale model, and an investor that gives me $50 gets a different scale, and the production is bigger, it's fancier, and so on. $25 is a plastic cup, and $100 one is a Dykex metal cup, along with my invention. It's a toy. But I don't have anything, my expected selling price, I'll be able to $20,000. It's a piece of equipment. Very compact, very capable, it's smart. Right, it's not consumer chemical. Most of them expect to sell it for profit. Sure. I would prefer it. But this is an ideal piece of for a trucker who is driving over the road, and he's tired of driving over the road, he wants to get back home every night, but this means he can handle freight. Truckers are already handling freight. As long as he keeps doing 26,000 pounds, he can handle all the freight he wants. He can distribute the deals he can have to worry about weight, worry about goods. He can do a lot of operating expenses.
Have you pitched your idea to many truckers so far?
Yes.
What's their
Oh, what can I do?
really? That
Yeah, I stopped there. So the guys that tend to be the biggest vendors are the small guys, the little guys who only know where a piece of business is so they can use my device to make it all happen. Because my device delivers 100%. There's no such thing as failure. No such thing.
So where do you go from here? How much engineering? 100,000? 200,000? 5 million? Is what? 20 million? Oh, 20,000. That's why you're thinking crowdfunding.
Yes.
Have you looked into crowdfunding at all? I mean, do you know how that actually works? I know, but just help me connect it on. You need it, first of all, you need about 20 grand to just kind of get it to the proof of concept point. Then you need how much more to have a kickoff? So what you'd be willing to give up? What percentage of the pie? What are you, crazy? Get out of here.
But you know, I have thought about it, so that's my answer. I don't know. I don't have a feeling. At $200,000 or so, what do I want to say? So, it's such a small amount compared to the actual need. Around 6 to 8. And I haven't done any projections, so I don't know. I think it's about 10 to 15. I want to go to dark back. Dark back
Where you throw darts? Yeah.
dark.
Oh, dark.
Dark back. Dark back is when you start to machine up and out lights to go away. And stuff. Let's put it up. It has to be that way in order to get the cost down to the point where go low and then lease. Think about leasing. I can't have a lot of money in this thing.
Well,
Because it's going to cost $20,000 to build the first 10 each, 20,000 each. to build the first 10.
keep in mind that very unscientific, but it's again and again and again proves true. If you think you need X to do something, you probably need 2 or 3 X to do that.
I think they can go for around 10. But I'm telling you, it's like 20.
Well, if and when you get to the point where you're looking to raise, at least 200,000. Below that, it's hard to justify the effort that being spent.
I've got to get to the point where I have enough money to put something like this.
I appreciate that.
I was sort of close to paying Roger for a copyright.
Do you have any questions we haven't addressed? Paul. Peter? What? Peter. Is that what that says?
Yes. No, that's well. I'm looking to start an LLC possibly. They've got programs
Just so you know, starting an LLC, if we have a credit card that has $50 worth of available credit on it, and in 10 minutes, I can have an LLC done off this machine in about 10 minutes. Starting an LLC is easier. If you have a pulse, you can start an LLC. That's the least of it. However, not all LLCs are created equal. Each LLC needs what's called an operating agreement, which lays out, all the different kinds of ownerships, rights, buy-sell agreements, and so forth. The operating agreement is at least a third of this document. So that's the expensive part. Starting an LLC, just starting it, practically.
What he says is exactly right. And if you're ready to start an LLC, it's almost not this. The price is the same. And it's you don't have to you don't have to have an agent to sell it online, and that makes sure the information and that becomes your
Yep.
I don't know if this is too complicated question to answer, and I know it's not really what you're selling, your expertise, but how would you compare what you're talking about to getting a small business development, small business administration? I don't know that much at all about small business.
All I can say is, based on my experience with those things, I could do one of these in about a third of the time. Those small business loans, oh my God, the paperwork and the administrative stuff is just enormous. And remember, it's still a loan, which means you have to pay it back. Whereas this is investment capital, which you don't have any, obviously you have an obligation to the investors to do the best you can with their money, but it doesn't create an obligation to pay it back, which is huge.
The SBA is
Oh,
I mean, if you think that money is going to be huge, the hoops that puts you through every single month
if you're a veteran, it's a little easier, but not much.
I want either money given to me in return for training, or I want like a cheap
And you want investors that can maybe bring something more to the table. Just a minute.
I don't want to be all by myself. That's nuts.
Whereas the SBA people, they don't do that. That's not why they're there. That's not their reason for
So
being.
refer me to score.
Score.
That's who it is.
There's a pretty active score group in Steamboat Springs, and half of them are terrific. They really, they've made a lot of money. They are prepared to give back. Usually their advice is, it may not be right on for the specific business that they're talking about, but there's a lot to be said for talking to somebody who's been there, done that, who can hold your hand through the rough stretches. And there are always rough stretches.
There's something else to it, that is,
enough to make the idea successful, to make business.
And I say, you know, work your ass off. What do you think?
I've owned businesses before, so I know what it takes.
It's gotta be honest with you.
I know what it takes.
Okay.
You also you gotta keep your sense of humor because otherwise your investors can, not always, but can just make you crazy.
That's better. Investors, you're better off having fewer partners.
Oh,
Possible. Hey, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna spend the night and go back tomorrow morning. Well, give me a call. We can, do some shit on the phone. I get down here maybe once every 2 weeks or so. So in the summer, I get down here more often than in the middle of January, which is, coming over 11,000-foot mountain passes in the middle of January. Terrible. Um, what did you do west of Craig? Is that in the, what is it, the Powder?